Okay, grade 8. This is your Math Links 8, chapter 6.5 on division of fractions. Your first question, your homework was question 7, which says divide using a common denominator. So it says 3/5 divided by 9/10. And what this wants you to do is it wants you to think about if I had 3/5, an equivalent fraction that would be 6/10. 6/10 divided by 9/10 is really the question. So when we have a common denominator of 10, what we can really do is we can think of this as being, this now becomes just this, dividing the numerators, dividing the denominators, just like we would do multiplication. Except when we divide 10 by 10, our denominator becomes 1. So what I'm really left with is just whatever is up here in the numerator, and 6 divided by 9, what I'm going to think of that as is simply this number. If you want to think of it over 1, you can. But since that over 1 doesn't count, it's just 6/9 is your answer. Or, if you reduce it down to the lowest terms, it would be 2/3. So your answer is 2/3. And for the second one, if we think about it the same way, oh, hang on a second. Think of it the same way. So 1 1/2 is really 3/2 divided by 5/6. And if you want to see what common denominator to use, you use 6 as your lowest common denominator. That'd be 9/6 divided by 9. So divide your numerators, you go 9 divided by 5. Divide your denominators, you get 6 divided by 6. So really you get 9 divided by 5 over 1. We won't write that because, of course, that would be silly. So our answer is 9/5 or 1 4/5. And for the last one, we get 10/3 divided by 11/6. Common denominator will be 6. We get 20 divided by 11 over that 6 divided by 6, which is 1. So 20 over 11 is our answer, which is 1 9/11. Now the second part says divide using multiplication. And what we learned in the show you know part was that when you divide using multiplication, you can keep your first fraction, change your division to multiplication, and use what we call the reciprocal of the second fraction. So the reciprocal of 3/4, all we do to get the reciprocal is swap the numerator and denominator. I then would have 5/12 multiplied by 4/3. Now to get the answer, you can do one of two things. You could either cross reduce if you wanted to. You can go, that's 1 over 3 if you wanted to. And if you didn't cross reduce, you could just simply multiply your numerators, which is 5 times 4 over 12 times 3, which is 20 over 36, which in lowest terms is 5, because they both can be divided by 4. 5 over 9. The second one, 4 1/2 divided by 1 1/4. If I do this question, excuse me, I can use, think of it as 9/2 divided by 5/4, or 9/2 multiplied by the reciprocal of 5/4, which is 4/5. I'm going to cross reduce this time, so 4 over 2 is going to become 2 over 1. I end up with an answer of 18 over 5, or 3 3/5. And the last question, I'm going to think of 10 as being 10 over 1 divided by 5/2, which is going to be the same thing as 10 over 1 multiplied by the reciprocal of 5/2, which is 2/5. Cross reduce 10 over 5 will become 2 over 1. Multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators. You can answer 4 over 1 or just 4. Now for all of these questions, if I was to take all of these answers that I have, and I want to think of them as being estimations, if I actually estimated these and I said, this is a little bit less than 50 cents, so we'll just say 50 cents. And I'd say divide it into piles of 75 cents. Right? How many piles could I make? Well, I couldn't make one, but I could make 2/3 of a pile. Right? If I had 50 cents and I had to make them into piles of 75, I could make them into 2/3, which is pretty close to 5/9, because 6/9 would be 2/3. Same thing here. If I had $4.50, that's what 4 1/2 would represent in money, and I divide it into piles of $1.25, which is 1 1/4. I couldn't make 4 piles, but I could make 3 piles, which would be $3.75, and I'd have 75 cents left over. So as a result, I can make 3 3/5, which is pretty close to what my estimation would be, 3 piles and something. And the last one, if I had $10 and I made them into piles of $2.50, I can make exactly 4 piles. So my estimation and my calculation are exact. Question 9 says simply divide. So for this one, I'm going to use the method that I prefer, which is the change, division, and multiplication of the reciprocal. Keep your first fraction, change to multiplication, use the reciprocal of 4/5, which is 5/4. Multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators, and you get the answer of 15/16. For the next question, if you have a mixed fraction, always change them to improper. I have 5/3 divided by 17/6, which is equivalent to 5/3 multiplied by the reciprocal of that. Cross reduce if possible, so 6/3 will become 2/1. You get 10/17 as your answer. And the last question, make sure when you see a whole number, think of it as being over 1. Divided by 3/4 will be 12/1 multiplied by the reciprocal. Cross reduce, 12/3 can reduce to 4/1. Multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators, you get your answer of 16. Question 10, again, is just expanding on this division, another few more practice questions. So 13/12 is equivalent to 1 1/12. Divided by 5/2 is equivalent to 13/12 multiplied by the reciprocal. Reduce that down to 1/6, you would have 13/30, which is your answer in lowest terms. 8/11 multiplied by the reciprocal of 4/5 will cross reduce here. 8/4 can reduce to 2/1. I get 10/11 when I multiply my numerators and denominators. And the last one, 1 3/8 is 11/8 divided by 11/4. Change it to multiplication by the reciprocal. Ooh, this is nice because it cross reduces beautifully. 1/1, 1/2. When I multiply the numerators, I get 1. Denominators, I get 2. So the answer is 1/2. Question 11 says, in a comedy review, each performer has a quarter-hour slot. How many performances are there in a 2-hour show? So for this one, we're going to say 2 hours divided into quarter-hour time slots. So our division statement that represents this would be a 2-hour show divided into quarter-hour time slots. I'm going to keep 2 as being a whole number, 2/1 or 2. Change it to multiplication and use the reciprocal. So 2/1 times 4/1, well, we know that that's just 2 times 4, which is 8. So therefore, there are 8 time slots in a 2-hour show. Question 12 says it takes 2½ scoops of flour to make 1 cake. So if you have 15 scoops and you want to divide them into 2½ scoop baggies, because you want to make each baggie is going to be the flour you need for a cake. So I have 15 scoops. I want to divide them into 2½ scoop baggies so I can make as many cakes as I can. You would have 15/1 divided by 5/2, or 2½. Keep your 15, change the multiplication and use the reciprocal. Cross reduce, 3/1. You'd have 6/1, or therefore, you can make 6 cakes. 6 cakes. I can't spell cakes. That's close enough. That's going to be cakes. Close. And question 13, your last question, says 3/4 of a can of apple juice fills 6 glasses. So 3/4 of a can of apple juice fills 6 glasses. How many glasses will a full can of apple juice fill? So the first thing I would like to know is how much of a can of apple juice does 1 glass take? So if I take 3/4 of a can and I divide it between the 6 glasses of apple juice I have. Now I want to think about 6 as being 6/1. So 3/4 of a can. This is how much apple juice it takes to fill in 6 glasses. So if I take that can, 3/4 of a can, divide it between the 6, I will think of 3/4. multiplied by the reciprocal of 6, and this is where a lot of people make mistakes. The reciprocal of 6 is 1 over 6, and I don't see the reciprocal if I put it like this. If I just have 6 like this, I don't see the reciprocal. But if I put 6 over 1 as the whole number, I can see it a lot better. That means I get 3 over 24, which means 1/8. So it takes 1/8 of a full can of apple juice to make 1 glass of apple juice. So it takes 1/8 to make 1 glass. 1/8 to make 1 glass. It would take 8/8 to fill it, which means I would need 8 glasses. I could fill 8 glasses per full can, not per 3/4 can, but per full can. All right, any questions? Make sure you ask me next class.